Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Morning.
What is today? Wednesday? Yeah, it's Wednesday.
Wednesday morning. Yeah.
October 1st.
Yeah.
Yikes. I object. I want summer
Yeah.
back.
Well, shutdown day too.
Morning, Jeff. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Brian, can you hear me okay?
No.
Can hear you. Sure, Rob, can hear you.
Okay.
Jeff, I'm going to make you a co-host. You can share your screen if you want.
Hey, you know what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sign out. Marianne just joined. She gonna slip over to her computer. Okay, I'll be right back in.
See you soon.
Oh, he was early. So,
Just letting people in as we wait here. Okay. Welcome. Thanks everybody else for joining. If you could just change your name and put your name in the chat so we can have a list of who's here. Um, it's weird when we watch the recordings, the names aren't on the little squares. So sometimes it's hard to figure out who's here and who's not here. But thank you all for being here.
Good morning. We all spend some of our time being blue squares.
I feel like it's Hollywood squares.
Yeah.
Let's see. Dan Salvucci just called me.
can you hear us, Brian?
I can hear you loud and clear, Marianne. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I don't think you can see us, though.
I know the T is a Teams environment, so thank you for translating. Marianne, I can see you. You're a little askew, but
I'm gonna move over.
We're
been the
gonna
case
move.
for a long time.
Okay.
Thanks for joining. And just if you could possibly just put your name and your community in the chat, that would help us with the minutes. And if you don't mind, change your name in the little square. Rename yourself with your name and your community. We would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Get back to seeing first.
And Marianne, I'm going to make you a co-host so you can share your screen if you want to do that.
I do at some point, for sure.
Okay. So it's funny, Marianne, you are blurred out, but we can see Jeff. Most people prefer me blurred out. So
Well, most people prefer me blurred out and see the CFO. Trust me on that
let me yeah, no comment. No comment.
one.
Where am I? Can't see. I'll unblur.
Look at that, unblur.
Well, let's just see if I can do it.
No, don't worry about it. You're wonderful.
None.
There you go.
There we go. It's a little blurry. It's a little blurry still in the background.
Well, so are the T's finances. Oh,
Zing, zing,
Oh, that jokes.
zing, zing.
did you like that? That
I
was
like
terrible.
that. I like
That was
that.
a-
This is where my
That was a
kids would
bit-
tell me, no
That was
dad
a
jokes.
Doom joke.
Yeah, no dad jokes, Dad.
There we go.
There you go.
There we go. No blur.
There you go. Wow, I can see everybody.
So Mayor Koch just called me. Oh, there's Frank. Frank, he has an emergency in Quincy that he had to tend to. So he asked if somebody else could take the chair. So Mayor Keefe or Mayor O'Connell, do one of you mind calling us to order, and we'll get going?
I'll let Mayor O'Connell handle this one, if you'd like.
Joining us, I call the meeting to order.
Thank you, ma'am. It's wonderful to have mayors and chairmen of select boards. Everybody knows how to do this stuff. It's great. So if you don't mind, I'll just get going. So why don't we move straight on to Jeff? Let me do a brief introduction, and then Jeff, you can say a few words about yourself. Jeff Cook is the Chief Administrative Officer of the MBTA. Came to the T from Fidelity. I think it's been about 5 years now you've been with the authority, Jeff. So you've seen.
It's going on about 8. It's going at 8.
Is it going on 8? Wow. Okay.
5 year longer than I thought I would be here.
Wow. Time flies when you're having fun. Why don't you introduce yourself, Jeff, and then we look forward to hearing from you, and then we'll do some Q&A if that's all right after that.
Yeah, great. No, well, first of all, it's a pleasure to meeting you all. Thank you, Brian, for asking me to address and answer any questions that I might have. So a little bit about my background. I spent 28 years at Fidelity Investments, where I held various executive positions over my time there. The last being I ran their entire real estate operations across the globe and data infrastructure throughout the globe as well. I guess when you look at specifically, I am a financial person, but I go in between the worlds of legal, procurement, HR, technology very easy because of my entire background. I retired from Fidelity in 2017, and because I was one of a select few that could speak on the behalf of FMR, the parent company, I sat on various nonprofit boards and boards in the city. And so when I retired, the current governor had went to Fidelity and wanted to see if there were business folks that could come in and maybe help the MBTA. I was asked, would I be interested? I am, can sit and say at that time, I did not know a lot about the MBTA. I said I'd be interested. I went back and I read the 2015 report of all the issues here at the MBTA. Before coming, I'm a firm believer. I have 5 advisors that I have are leaders in the industry. I went to those 5 advisors. One was Tom Glenn, and I specifically asked very detailed questions about the MBTA and the people at the MBTA. Long story short, in around March of 2018, I decided to come over. When I came over, I came in as the Chief Procurement Officer and then was asked to step in as the CAO temporarily. Until David Panagore, who came in, took on the position, and when David left, the current GM eventually came to me and said, "Would you like to come back in and take the position?" I said, "I would, be happy to fill and do anything I could to help Phil change the culture and change, the perception of the MBTA." So that was now I'm here in the CEO chair about 1.5 years. I guess when you look at my oversight, I won't go through all the 10 divisions, but the major ones is, occupational health, the office is the CFO, the office is the CIO, HR, and procurement. And amongst real estate and TOD, I recently transitioned the real estate group in TOD to another direct report to the GM because the both of us thought that It makes common sense to do that because really in the future, I need to concentrate on IT, HR, and the financial side to it. And as we start to kind of grow and mirror what the state is doing, the governor wants from a TOD perspective, they should be kind of standing alone and really watching what we're doing from that perspective. So I recently transat to a lady named Erica Maza, who works directly for the GM, to which I help. So with that, I mean, I guess I'll give you my viewpoint in regards to the MBTA financial aspect, budgets, and so on to that. It was apparent that when I stepped into this position, that one thing needed to improve, and that was the relationship with A&F. And it had nothing to do with, you know, people not liking each other or whatever it may be. It was more about we just were speaking different languages and trying to interpret information, understand information, and so on to that. And a lot of it was in regards to how we reported head count and so on to that. So once I delved in that and I understood that, I can sit and say our relationship with A&F is, 360. I meet with them and Marianne regularly, just to talk about our financial aspects and partner together so that they clearly understand where the MBTA budget is and where we are going, and where our head count is going. So we're in very solid ground. I think we put forth a 3-year budget to the governor and the legislature. It was 26, 27, and 28 that I believe is very solid and is on target. The one thing I always point out when there's a lot of articles about the MBTA spending and so on to that, is a few things I would point out. There is always areas of where any organization that's a $3 billion operating entity needs to look internally to become more efficient. And MBTA is no different. We need to do that, and continue to do that. But when we submitted that 3-year plan, in that plan, each year, we had on average about $95 million of reductions in savings we had to find. Do we know where they are? Not really, but we will find them. So part of just not sitting and taking the money from the legislature and the governor, we in turn realize that we have to find our own savings and become more efficient. The GM understands that, so do I. CFO knows that, so that's one thing. The other thing I'd like to point out is I am always very confident that the numbers that now we have put together are close. And when I say close, I don't mean they're way off, in the sense that if you were to look at our operating expense and you were to take what our cost is from employees, what our costs from debt, what our costs for commuter rail, what is for ferry, what is for the ride, and so on to that, I can quickly get to where there's a fixed, and I also use the terminology variable fixed, and I'll explain that, to where our fixed and kind of variable fixed cost is 95% of the entire 3 billion. So if anyone sits and thinks that you're going to come in and you can find hundreds of millions of dollars a cut at the MBTA, it's not accurate. Now, if you're looking at expenses, what we're trying to do is how do you be more efficient? And so I'm going to expand on when I say that quasi. That quasi is that that's where you suddenly get into contracted services. It could be like cleaning, where you have to do it, but do you need to do it at the level that you're doing at? Like an example, did you need to do it at the pandemic level or a lower level? When you start to figure out how you can reduce without touching service, without touching safety, without touching people, you're down to that bone that you're trying to figure out how you do. Now, again, there's absolute ways that you can do that to be efficient. But when we're already taking 100 million off of the number, you can suddenly realize at the most highest level, it's not like it's very quickly that you can find another 100 million over and above we dedicated to try to find on an annualized basis. Not being said that, I'm gonna pause for a second, so I'm accurate and the CFO can kick me underneath the table if I misquote. But we, at the end of FY 26, are forecasting to be at 8,030 heads, operating, not capital, operating. That's a pretty significant jump between where we were a year and a half ago to now, okay? So the recent conversations I was literally having with the GM this morning is we're getting at a point in time that we truly need to do self-reflection and look internally and make sure that we're properly structured and we are looking for efficiencies. Because when you get to that 8,000, that's a lot of people that we've added. We've added quickly in certain areas. And, you know, when I was at Fidelity, we grew that company when I was there from 8,000, a little less than 8,000 to 56,000. So I'm very familiar with how quickly parts of an organization can grow, and are you structurally and you have the right people to manage associate and you grow too quickly, thus you have to backtrack and go back a little bit. And so I think before we start literally going forward, you know, and I even count, we should question what we said to the FTA, not that we wouldn't do it, but I think there's a way to slow roll it to just make sure that in turn, we're taking this time to reflect and look internally so that ensure that we are structured and we are looking at our expenses, because everything that's happened in the federal side today, there's no guarantee. So I think it's the right time to look at our head count, think about it, think about the future head count, and how much that truly needs to grow. Also look at, you know, what additional services that we need to add, from that perspective. So right timing, and I'll stop there. That's a quick overview, Brian, of my thoughts, but I'm very comfortable to where the budgets that we have this year and the next 2 years will remain, those are our figures, and that's what I've directed the CFO on, except in only to the extent that when we go out and we talk to the business groups, is there anything that is significant that has changed? You know,
Right.
example, did we add another ferry route that's gonna cost a lot of money? Review Keolis, you know, making sure that we understand that. Did we add another service? So that's the only way that we're gonna change any number relative to 27 and 28 if something has significantly changed. Otherwise, we're trying to keep to that commitment and funding level, knowing that, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Nope,
Mary Ann.
that's exactly right.
I think that what we received from the legislature, and I thank you, you know, for them and the governor for, you know, and all of you supporting the MBTA, because it is needed. But the funding gets us through to like mid 27, mid 27,
Two-thirds of
really.
the way.
So in third, there's obviously, you know, if we meet these budgets, there still needs to be a conversation or funding in 27,
Yep.
second half,
That's right.
and 28,
That's right.
because it fully wasn't funded for all 3 years.
That's
But I'm
right.
very comfortable with the numbers that we gave. If something's, you know, doesn't significantly come up like I described.
That's right.
I'll pause because I could probably continue to go on and be happy to take questions on anything that's within my realm or world, if anyone has it.
Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate your introduction and you joining us this morning. I'll pass it back to Brian, if you have any comments, and also the members if they have any questions or comments.
Thank you, ma'am. And I wanted to welcome Mayor Brianna, the Vice Chair of the Advisory Board, who I guess I gave the incorrect link to. My apologies, but welcome.
Hi, Mary.
And I guess, Jeff, Mary Ann, let me start with this. So, as you know, I've been paying very close attention to T finances for far too long, longer than I'd care to admit. I also was inside. I was inside the budget department, and I can tell you, coming out of that, there was an austerity mindset
Mhm.
to how everything was operated. And I can tell you that when I left the authority in 2018, there was 5,500 of us. And that was too few. It was too few. We couldn't get stuff off the desk because you were too busy doing the day-to-day stuff, and you had never had time to do the sort of bigger picture stuff, or even the smaller picture stuff in some cases. So, Jeff, Marianne, I guess could I ask you to just expand on how you're trying to move the authority away from an austerity mindset, if you are, and what that kind of looks like inside, and then also how does one go about changing that kind of culture, that kind of mindset, that kind of approach? Because it was pretty ingrained in us when I left. And granted, it's been a long time since I left, but I'm just curious if you could comment on austerity versus non-austerity.
Why don't you
Sure.
say first from the financial
Sure.
side, and maybe I can
Sure.
holistically what I see at the
Sure.
MBTA.
Sure. We looked at like 2015, we looked at our total expense base from 2015 to 2021. And we looked at the year-on-year expenses. And what we saw was from that time period, like a year-on-year growth rate of anywhere from 0% to a 1 to 2% to a 3% growth rate, which is what I would call austerity, right? Like during that time period, we had the FMCB board, which was, during Governor Baker's period of time and tenure, and their after the Snowmageddon in 2015, their mandate was really to control costs, get a balanced budget. And I think when Brian Shortsleeve was here and Mike Abramo as the CFO, they didn't have a balanced budget. So their focus was really getting the financials in a better place. If you look beyond 22 and when we went to the MBTA board and when Phil Eng started in April of 23, we started to invest in the track improvement plan, and dollars were put back into the system. And then I think what started to happen, and this is probably where Jeff is going to chime in, we've now invested in our employees. In 2024, we've hired over 1,000 people. Our headcount has gone up, and we're now on a trajectory where I think we're on steady state. Our slow zones are gone, and our KPIs related to cycle time and headways are all improved. So I'm going to turn it back to Jeff.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Marianne saying, and I think my viewpoint is that I don't want to come across that we went too far the other way but there is this time when I say reflection to come back a little bit. If we just look as for an example, that everything that we had to do for the FTA and we had to look at our head count and so on to be able to ensure that we were delivering safe and reliable service. And they come in and they gave us the caps, and one was obviously looking at the organization or head count. And part of that, people came in and they were doing mathematical equations. They were going to do this, this, and this. Well, if we take what we reported to the FTA, which we did, and I'll be close to very close to accurate, over the next 2 years, we would be hiring like 300 and something people within that program, just because, hey, to continue to deal with what the FTA has outlined. Well, I think it's a point in time to reflect and question, do we actually really need to have 300 additional heads associated with that? And we should always have to be in the ability to tell the FTA, we'll get to where we need to be, but we've made a lot of progress. We're safe and reliable today. So I think there's always this time to maybe step back a little bit and relook. And that's an example. I think we went quickly one end of fixing everything we had to fix, and it needed to get fixed. It was abused for years, and I have no problem saying, you'll find that I'm extremely transparent. I mean, I came in here and coming from the private sector, I was like, this is what you do, and this is how you operate. And I came from a privately held company that had billions of dollars to do everything that's right. And so I think we made a lot of progress and we're in a good state. But that's an example that just because, hey, we have to do something, the FTA did it, we've done a lot. We're there. Let's reflect before we say we hire another, say 300 people in whatever division. Not that we might not need them, but are they in the right locations is what I'm saying. So I hope that answers some of Brian. An example of what I mean is.
Well, it does,
sweeping
and I
balance
just,
sheet.
let me be very clear that I think the control board did amazing work and
Yes.
busted their humps weekly for 6 years. God love them.
Yes,
But
I
yes,
agree with you on that. I do, and thank goodness to the board that we have, and and to be
yeah,
honest with you, thank you for you. I've sat in those meetings where you've continued to push, everyone's here's thoughts to that board and to us. So you've been a very good champion to push the change here, by the way, and representing the individuals and the mayors and towns, by the way.
I appreciate that. Jeff. Thank you. So Mayor Brianna, if you don't mind, do you want to take over? Or I can just call on folks, your call.
Sure. Oh, yes, absolutely. I didn't realize our
Yeah,
other two
Mayor
mayors
Koch couldn't be
weren't
here.
here.
He had an incident in Quincy, so if I guess the baton is yours, ma'am.
Could I just,
Okay.
sorry, jump in for one moment, just to
Oh, sure.
the mayor chat.
If everybody else wants to just mute so that we can listen to Mayor O'Connell, and then I'm going to call on Rob.
Thank you. We just need to go back and do the minutes because we didn't do that yet. So I just want to let you know that.
Yes, ma'am. My plan was to do that at the end, if that's all right.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Rob.
Oh, great. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and welcome Jeff and Marianne. Thanks for coming to see us. I have three questions, and some may be obvious. First, you talked about a balanced budget, but the budget we're reviewing shows an operating deficit. So if you could just talk a little bit about that and how you would address that. Second is if you could make some comments or thoughts on the millionaires tax, and has that been significant? Do you think the T is getting a fair share of it? And how's that working out, and how does it look for the future? And then my third question is a little more local. I'm from Ashland. We're on the Framingham Worcester line, one of the busiest commuter rail lines. And my understanding is that there's a plan in place to increase the schedule to 30 minutes each way all day, which is a great idea, but I'm just wondering if that's really realistic given current fiscal atmosphere and various priorities. So thank you for taking my questions.
Oh, great. So I'll let Marianne take the first questions on the balanced budget and see if she would answer the same way I would answer.
Yeah, so on the balanced budget, you're exactly right. So for 2026, we do have a savings target that Jeff referred to of $82 million that will offset the deficit that I spoke about. And we still are left with a significant deficit, but that will be offset by our deficiency fund. So that's the rainy day fund that we have. So the Commonwealth has a similar fund. So that's where we put any savings that we have from the prior year to fill in the budget gaps on our operating budget side. So that's the fund that we continually fund with our cost savings.
I'm glad you brought that up because I failed to bring that up and kind of maybe voice my opinion on that. So when Marianne talks about this rainy day fund, and it's roughly in the $380 million fund that sits here, that fund is used to when we in turn, need to balance or do not have the funding and so on to that. I think it's very key for the future of the MBTA that eventually that number is higher than that number, and it's never used to kind of balance. It's used there clearly for a rainy day to be able to use. Knowing that it is hard to do what I just stated because essence, the money does come from the legislature and so on to that and trying to fund something that sits there. But I do think it's very important to pay attention to that number because it's always being used.
Right.
And if you don't, then you're using it, you don't have it,
Right.
then you're stuck.
Trouble.
You have a financial problem here. So I always think that fund should remain there. I think then there was a question on the millionaires tax. Boy, that is a really good question. I've figured out how I dance around that. All right, so being transparent. First of all, I believe at the end of the day, we probably should get more of the millionaires tax fund that coming to the MBTA. I'm going to preface that's the CAO, me personal side to it. I believe we should get more from that perspective of what it was designed to do and versus how it's actually being distributed. But I do believe, I think the number is in a percentage wise, like 27% in total that we're getting. What's
We're currently we're getting 30%.
30%,
And-
like
and-
30% of it,
Yes.
of that figure to
And
that.
70% is education.
Yeah. I think there was a third
And there was
question.
My third question was about the was about the
Yes.
increase on the Framingham Worcester line.
commuter rail.
So
schedule.
I won't say the operational aspects to it because I prefer Ryan Caholen to do that. But my viewpoint is in the coming year and reflection of everything, we really need to look at everything.
Right.
We really need to look at service, professional services, our services relative to the communities and so on. That is what we can do. If we're going to take things on, we just need to know that then we have to find the financial funding.
Mhm.
And if we can't find the financial funding, then in turn, there's going to be hard decisions to be made because the money has to come from somewhere. And it's not like we're just going to get additionally more money over what was already allocated to us. So I think, to me, my viewpoint is everything needs to be on the table a little bit to look at. But we need to know we need to service the communities the way they're supposed to be serviced. So, I mean, I guess that's my viewpoint.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Duncan, and then we'll go to Mayor Keefe.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Jeff and Marianne for being here. My question goes, but we're commuter rail kind of thinking, and I'm wondering with the South Coast having added so many track miles and therefore some real fixed maintenance costs there, that obviously shows up in the cost, but it isn't broken out. But my question really is, how are things doing with the fare recovery for commuter rail with the North and now with South Station and other barriers coming into effect? I just don't know whether you have any idea how those increased revenues might compare to the increased expenses for South Coast.
Thank you for that question. I do not know that. I do see the fare recovery on a scorecard in total, but Brian, let me get that back to you. Let me get that answer back. It is a good question, and I don't know broken out by there, but that's good. Let me get back to you.
Thanks.
I would say the gates at South Station aren't all in or at Back Bay just yet, but I know they're in process. I know in South Station they're in process.
Right.
So
that just might be a piece of good news that
Hmm.
you could get out there somehow.
yeah.
Well, I also think good news, and also good question of how to make sure my team's breaking it out by different lines and
Yes,
looking
if-
at
if
it.
we
I mean, I
can.
think it's a good way to think about it than just holistically looking at
Fair.
one number.
Mhm.
Thanks.
That's a no.
Thank you. We're going to go to Mayor Keefe and then to Joseph.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for being on. I just wanted to, not necessarily a question, but a little bit more of a comment to Mary and Jeff. I got to be honest with you. I think that the approach is pretty refreshing, and I get it. I think like all of us, we know that the expenses and the budget's very, very heavy, and we talk about operating in deficit and what types of future investments need to be made. So I think it's more about the priorities of safety and service are going to be the two major priorities. Those should the North Stars, I think, and I would imagine that that's part of your mission. But to think, when you do have 8,000 bodies or 8,000 heads, to think that, looking at it in the past and looking at what the technologies of today are there redundancies out there? Can you create efficiencies without going back down to 5,000? Every large organization, and you came from the private sector, so you realize it, has that percentage of waste. Is it 10%? Is it 2%? Is it 1%? But each percentage represents a big number. So I think looking at it that way, without going with this is the way it's always been, or this is how we've always staffed, or this is the amount that we need for one office, that doesn't always apply these days, especially with the use of different technologies. And, and I hate to, be the Jack Welch of the world, but, AI is going to change a lot of that. And we know that's going to probably be the anti-employment agency, but it's definitely balance. So I think I can appreciate your approach. It's very refreshing to hear. That doesn't mean we don't have problems, and there's problems in every large organization. So I look forward to hearing more of what over the next course of the year. What are some of those solutions, or what are some of those actions that added up to potential savings?
Well, I'm smiling because I agree 100% what you said regarding technology, and I'm gonna pause so I can not say too much on it. But the reason I'm smiling to that, I literally this morning was writing a memo regarding technology, and I have 3 organizations that report up to me that are technology, and I'm working and trying to consolidate these to create the efficiencies and set the MBT up for a long-term strategy. And the reason why I feel that is very important is because the MBTA obviously is a transit, company, obviously, to that aspect. It's also, a heavily construction company in what they do relative to all the work they do. We are fast becoming, when you get to the size of the organization that we are, there's almost, and I use the word very loosely, technology company inside of it, with hundreds of people in technology, just not my 3 divisions, technology that's embedded in each group with people there. And the future has to be is, how do you become more efficient? How do you use the data to make data decisions, off of that, and management decisions? And the key is how you organize that data. So to be able to use AI or whatever it may be, so I'm trying to think about is how do we set that going for the next 2, 3, 4 years down the line. So there's a very good comment to that, because there is an aspect to where we have to look for the efficiencies relative to that, let it be financial or other things. So great comment. I'm 100% agreeing with you. And when I do the reorganization, I'm happy to tell you, Brian and Pat.
Okay, Joseph, then Matthew.
Thank you, Mayor. And hi, Jeff, and hi, Marianne. For those of you who don't know, I was the chairman of the FMCB, and had the pleasure of working with both of them. First of all, let me follow up on Mayor Keefe's comments. I think it would be helpful if we could see a crosswalk between, let's say, operating staff and capital staff as they existed in 2019, say, more or less, before COVID, by department, and crosswalk that to what we have today, so we could understand what departments have really grown, and then have a good conversation about the why. I think that'd be helpful. I do agree that during the FMCB, everything got tightened way too much. But I'm old enough, I'm probably the oldest person on this phone call, who remembers when we had, I think, a Democratic governor, but certainly a Democratic legislature, and the MBTA became known as a budget buster, and suffered 5, 6, 7 awful years of real budget cuts because of the sense that the taxpayers' dollar was not being to good use. And one of the things I worry about is not only the growth of the staffing, but I worry that you all don't talk about the good things you're doing with respect to productivity. I think you need to show that in terms of what's going to be happening in future years. Just as an example, you've got the Type 10 Green Line vehicles coming, which you have made a major investment in. But that means where you currently have 2 Green Line cars with 2 operators, you're now going to have the same carrying capacity in 1 car with 1 operator. So you're really cutting the number of bodies you need to run the kind of service you run today in half. That's a great piece of news for the taxpayer and for the budget. Similarly, the mayor had talked about the commuter rail system and getting to 30-minute headways. Well, that's going to raise everybody's antenna about, oh my God, how are we going to pay for that? In reality, when you think about the automated fare collection system you have in, and the tap in, tap out that's getting deployed to station, substation, you're really in a position where you can take many of the employees who are working on, let's say, the Worcester train, where there's now, I believe, 12 employees plus the engineer operating the train, and you could spread those out to the other trains where you're providing more frequent service, because those people on the trains, the conductors, are no longer having to collect fares. So you don't need as many of them. And if you can find a program to go to operating doors, you can further reduce that and get greater productivity without laying anybody off, by the way, because you're trying to get to 15 to 30-minute headways to help relieve traffic congestion. I just think you need to tell that story better, because if you look at the headlines of the state budget and what we're likely to see over the next 3 years, everything is going to get tightened. And I hate to see another political backlash come at the T to undo all the good work that you've been doing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, former chair. It's a pleasure seeing you. It's been a long time since you were here when I was here, but thank you for that.
Matthew, and then Deborah, and then S. Barrett.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, folks, for the from the team for the really great briefing today. I think it was very helpful to understand a little bit more of the details there. I wanted to totally agree with everything that Joella just said. And I think one of the other things what some of their folks said before us, I think for the city of Boston, obviously we derive a lot of benefit from the services that the team provides, and it's incredibly crucial to us. And I think I wanted to echo a little bit of what Joe said about the need to focus on communicating the productivity increases and really like how those are enabling the authority to deliver the social benefits of public transportation more efficiently. And I think looking at how we can talk about, with the same number of staff, we're able to deliver more service, we're able to deliver more transit service, more seats, more. I'm sorry, is there
Matthew, if I could just stop you for 1 second, if we could have everybody mute their microphones. Maybe it's Marianne's that I see unmuted. We're getting some feedback. Thank you. Sorry.
Sure. I'm also in an office, so there might have been some background. So if that continues, I can talk later. But I did also want to say one thing on the rainy day fund. I do think I do want to say that from my perspective, from the city's perspective, in terms of the need for revenue, and I think that came out in terms of Marianne and Jeff talking about how there is still a deficit in the out years. In the operating budget, and we will need to find more sources of revenue. To some extent, it is still raining, and so I do just want to kind of bring that up. But thank you for this briefing. Okay. I think it's probably from my end. So talking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Deborah.
Yes, welcome, Jeff and Marianne. My name is Deborah Roberts. When we presented to the board and to you, we talked about the relationship between head count and consulting fees. So my question is, high level, what is your philosophy? One of the recommendations we made was to reduce consultant costs, basically to shift away from external services as internal capacity grows. Do you still have that philosophy, or has your philosophy changed?
No, I think absolutely under the current GM, he is absolutely more on bringing as much as in-house is possible, and what makes good common sense. That should be our core business. And even this morning, we were talking about revisiting all professional service contracts that we have at the MBTA. We did it once with every division of his direct reports, and we're going to start it again. So yeah, the thought process is when we can take and reduce those contracts, we should absolutely reduce those and bring them in from that perspective. And as long as this is going to be, my view is when you go to do that, you just have to make sure you're using a lens that these are long-term type of employees that you would have, not just bringing them in-house because you had a short-term problem to that and now you have it. It should be kind of, let's make sure that we're doing the right thing and setting up the organization for the future. But the absolute philosophy is not to have as many professional service contracts that we have, or contractors, I would sit and say.
Thank you very much.
I think I'm next.
Yes, Susan, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here today. I'm first going to start off with just some real world examples of like the difference between now and like when I started in Lexington and working with the MBTA. It's moved in a much more positive direction. When I started here, there was a major corridor project. Actually, it was in partnership with MassDOT, and some bus stops got moved. They got improved, got more accessible, which was great. But then bus stop signs never actually got installed or moved. So we have bus stops signs in the wrong locations. This took about a year and a half before I could get this corrected, before I could get the right person, get people out here. It was deeply frustrating. And now I've seen a huge night and day improvement. We were part of a group, a cluster of people who got some changes as part of bus network redesign recently, which very much appreciated. And the communication with the T was just so spot on. The person who was working on bus stops, the way that they had to change out all the bus stop signs. They put notices on every single bus stop sign. And anytime there was like a little glitch, which was not very often, I'd send an email, it would get corrected. It was amazing. So a shout out to the MBTA. That said, I do understand as for any organization, you always have to take a moment of reflection, periodically and just make sure you're doing everything as efficiently as possible. But I just want to make sure people have some real world context there of the night and day difference. Now, two questions. I'm wondering, and I don't see it on our budget, our simplified budget that we got, but and I'm wondering if in your departments this is something you're looking at, or who at the team might be looking at this. I know there's been conversation to potentially look at our ADA paratransit systems across the state and potentially have that be part of more of a statewide function. And I'm wondering if you could tell me anything about that. And then the other thing that I wonder about is, especially because we have this fair share money and trying to get the most out of every penny of that for transportation. I always think about how much each of our towns is spending on school bus transportation. And obviously, if we could get more kids to walk and bike, that helps with that. But if we could get more youth and their families on public transportation, granted, that may mean more public transportation, but if it's doing double duty, also helping people get to school, whether that be kids or the staff that work there. I realize that may not be an option in all communities, but I really think that's a way to kind of look at our funding more holistically. So I'm curious if anyone in your department is looking at any of that. Thank you very much.
So I would say on the first question, no one specifically within the CAO world is looking within that ADA aspect to it. What I can say holistically, and I will get a more detailed answer back to you, Brian, so you can give it to Susan, is that I know the GM's overall goal is that we should be connected more with the various, associations, the transit association I'm talking about within the regions and so on, to be more connected. So not knowing something specifically about that one area, I can say his thought was we should look to the future of how we're more connected in some way. But I'll find out more detail relative to that specific one, since I don't know it specifically. In regards to, I do think you asked a good question in regards to the buses and what the MBTA does. I might not know, anything specifically about that. My worry is, and I shouldn't say it's a worry, it's how the MBTA must continue to expand and provide its services to show the citizens in the Commonwealth we are better than we were, and that we are now in an environment that you can come back to the T. We are still falling very short of the percentage of, say, ridership overall, I'm looking at Mary Ann to make sure, I'm totally accurate, but the last number I saw, we are still percentages off from where we were pre-pandemic.
Absolutely.
And, when I talk to business community, my worry is, with not having, say, people come back into Boston, this and that, will we ever get back to that and how long it will take to there? I'm worried that, it's going to be a very long time if we do get back to that. So, that's where I think we have to continue to understand the services we want, understand the funding that's available, continue to look internally, because you're not going to get that revenue, I think, back for a very long time, unless suddenly you're going to change the rates, you know, riding the T. So, so anyway, that's an overview. I know it wasn't directly to that question, but it triggered just a thought of mine.
Bruce?
Yes, I just needed to unmute. Thank you for taking questions. So one of the questions I've raised for probably 2.5 years now on the board is there a budget, and is there any coordination in the departments at the T to maintain the charging stations at the T stops? The last time Brian looked into it, I think we heard that there were different departments trying to figure out who was responsible for it. And then another comment back we got was, well, maybe this will be handled by DOT, not by the MBTA. So I was curious, is that something that's come up? Because they're largely all breaking without any repair capability. And just curious if that's part of the budget.
Well, trying to sit and go through it, and I will find exactly who does own it. What I would answer is, depending on where the stations, where these are, it either would fall into the head of stations and infrastructure group, which has been newly over since the GM came, is a new group that has been created because there has been a lapse at the MBTA in regards to oversight of our infrastructure and our stations, which I would think they would fall into. But since I don't know exactly, I will make sure I get that back to you on specifically who I can point the finger at and go, they're breaking, which I will point the finger at when I get done if they're
The
breaking.
other question was whether there has ever been a budget for maintenance. Because it seems like they were put in with they're largely put in with a capital budget, but the service contracts from the companies are not purchased.
Well,
I don't know for.
See, I this is where I'll go out on a limb with me being this CEO, my own opinion. I've seen stuff here that, exactly that. Something gets done, no one thinks they understand the capital installation to it, and no one thinks the long-term operating aspect to it. And did you include that in the oversight to it? So I hope someone's thinking about it, but I believe from our standpoint, it doesn't show up in a line anywhere that sit and say it's there. Hopefully whoever I go back and say I'm pointing the finger, your problem, did you budget someone to that? But I also know from what I've seen over time, things like that tend to slip through because people don't think about connecting the overall cost of long-term cost of operating something, and they don't eventually they install it and they let it go. But I will find that out for you. Hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think many of them now just have to be repurchased.
So we have about 10 minutes left, folks, and we still wanted to hear from Mary Ann O'Hara. So if we're good with questions, Madam Mayor, can we move to that item?
Yep, and Brian, I'm assuming, because I came in late, that based on the conversation, we're on letter D, the budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then I'll just, we'll move on. I just be remiss if I didn't mention that I think there is, somewhat mismanagement when the T is having budget struggles and paid 54 million for a site to store buses when there are other options out there. That's just obviously my issue because Medford got completely screwed, and I have to listen to how I'm on this advisory board and in on the deal. So I'm just making that comment known because I'm irate about what's going on and what happened. But I think there is just some issues that the T needs to work on when you talk about budget. So next up is the committee reports from the committee chairs. So
Oh, sorry,
pass
ma'am.
it off to you, Brian.
Sorry, ma'am. We were gonna very quickly just hear from Marianne O'Hara about the fiscal 26 update. If that's all right. I think I gave you the wrong information. So Marianne, do you wanna,
Yes, I'm trying to
Go ahead.
share my screen.
please do?
It's
Apologies, that was my fault.
okay. Can you see my screen yet?
Nope.
I'm trying to share. Yep, maybe I'm not sharing. I'm on Zoom. Okay. Where do I share? Here we go. Here it is. Okay. Now can you see my screen?
Nope.
No, I'm doing something wrong. Not a Zoom person, so having a little trouble. Okay, let me try this again. Should tell me to share somewhere.
See if I can.
Do you want to send it to me and I'll share it?
That's not a bad idea.
We might need to
Yeah,
do
I
that.
need
It
to do
seems
that,
to be
yeah.
not connecting here.
Is this a different budget than the one sent out? Because we already have that.
No, I
Yeah,
don't
so
think it,
it's
hang
been
on.
updated since then. So
Yeah.
when we took our action, the final state numbers weren't solidified, and has subsequently happened. So I'd ask Marianne if she could just update us on what the final numbers looked like.
Yeah, I can, I'm sending it your way, Brian, but I
Thanks.
can just tell you what the numbers are, because I have it in front of me. So when I presented back in early June, and I know everyone in the advisory council knows that when we present in early June, we say it's our final budget, but the Commonwealth hasn't completed their process of getting the legislature to finish with the House and Senate negotiations based on the governor's budget. They don't pass the budget until, through the summer and sometimes into the fall. So our budget we base it on the governor's budget, and then we wait for the Senate and the House to finish. And then our revenues are finalized, when the Commonwealth's budget is done. So what happened this budget cycle for fiscal year 26, when I presented in June, I had a $168 million deficit with $82 million of savings. So our deficit was $86 million based on everything we knew at that time. And that was going to be solved with the deficiency fund. And then what happened, the House was pretty close to what the governor had said. The Senate change some of our numbers and as it relates to our additional state assistance and our contract assistance. And that reduced our revenue by a total of $218 million. So that increased our deficit to $386 million, call it $400 million. And then with the $82 million savings, we're at 304. What that means is we're still good because of the deficiency fund. We're good for 26. And as Jeff said, we're good for most of 27, probably out till March or April of 27. And as we look to doing the budget cycle for fiscal year 27, as we get closer to that, January, February, March, and as we close the books in fiscal year 26, I expect our savings numbers will go up, hopefully, and 27 will be clearer as we get to those, that process as we present our fiscal 27 budget. So looking good for 26 and looking pretty good for 27. So apologies again, I can't get the Excel up, but we're in pretty good shape for 26 and pretty good shape for 27.
So
Anyone?
thank you. If, can we refer this to the operating budget committee just to take a look at it, if that's all right? And then maybe, Madam Mayor, if it's possible, could we take action on those 2 outstanding minutes, which I hastily am trying to look up and find. I think it
Sure,
was
and yeah,
February
that's
and
fine.
June.
Yep, I have the agenda up. And then if we could also refer to the budget committee, just maybe increasing what, like was discussed, maintenance costs. I know that Medford I took the commissioner out to one of our sites and there's no handicap accessibility and they've destroyed the pavement. The buses have absolutely destroyed the pavement. Somebody's going to get hurt. So maybe we need to invest a little bit more in making sure that there's handicap accessibility and safety as it relates to the MBTA, where people get on and off buses.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We'll turn it over. Is there a motion for approval of the February 2nd, 2025 minutes, as well as June 10th, 2025?
Make that motion.
I'll motion Dan
I'll-
Sublety Whitman.
Thank you, Dan. Seconded by,
Oh, I made the motion, Rob Scher from Ashland. I think it
Okay.
was seconded by Dan Hill.
Okay, I
Okay.
second. Correct. Thank
motion
you,
by
Rob.
Rob, seconded by Dan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
Great. With that, ma'am, I think we can call it and give thanks to the T and go from there.
I'll just call it. Yep, I'll call it. Have a wonderful day. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Dan from Whitman.
Dan,
Second.
seconded by Frank.
Frank.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Have
Thanks,
a wonderful day,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.